Hi there, this is Ronnie Amber's Night coming at you with a video. I posted a topic on the RPG Brigade Facebook page um, regarding my own views on writing villains, specifically in horror games. I just want to expand a little on my views on it. I suffer from social anxiety. I find people very scary. As such, in my horror games, whilst um, I've not been opposed to using supernatural entities, I tend to find the scariest kind of monsters are human beings. Um, and I like to, as well as I'm able, to project that fear so that, you know, in the words of Christian Bale in Batman Begins, um, to paraphrase, humans frighten me. It's about time, you know, they share my fear. Um, as such, when I'm writing, I have a particular penchant for serial killers. Um, they fascinate me. Programs about serial killers, not so much real life serial killers, because um, whilst they're interesting from sort of psychological perspective, they're also genuinely scary. But I like watching shows like Criminal Minds. Back in the 90s, it was Cracker. That's the original UK version, not the US version. Although I have seen the US version, um, and it doesn't compare to the original British one. And a very short-lived show in the US called The Inside, which is a fantastic show and should have had far more episodes. But also, I've really enjoyed Hannibal. Um, and obviously, I like films like Seven and Silence of the Lambs and things like that. But I like those kinds of shows. The sort of psychological profiling. And when I'm writing serial killers, and it tends to be, I, I don't like the sort of unkillable monster, the kind of Freddy and Jason style of killer. Um, I like to make my killers far more three-dimensional. Really look at the background. What is their ritual? What is the victimology? Um, why that ritual? What is its purpose? What is the significance of it? Uh, why that kind of victim? What needs is the killer trying to satisfy with this act? Um, and also the fact that I'm interested in the internal and external forces that mold someone into a serial killer. That fascinates me. I'm also fascinated with the notion of confronting players with a killer who is also a victim. The idea that the players will ultimately confront not only the monster they're chasing, but the monster that created the monster. Um, I find that fascinating. A comment was made, why don't I simply use supernatural entities? Um, Again, I'm not against them. I've done it. I've ran games with vampires, I've ran games with werewolves, I've ran games with ghosts, spirits, and zombies. I've done all that. And whilst they can be unique and interesting and fascinating, um, to me, they've always represented uh, even in their original sort of setting and sort of stories, they represented aspects of humanity taken to an extreme, an extra extreme, because they use supernatural elements. Whereas I'm far more interested in a human being who takes an aspect of what we would consider to be monstrous to a logical extreme, rather than a supernatural, uh, going right to the line rather than the supernatural which can go over it. I have on occasion used human serial killers that have a little bit of a supernatural um, within them. But it's the humanity of them that makes them monsters. The supernatural part of them merely allows them to be more efficient. They would still be this monster without those supernatural elements involved. Um, which is why I like using them. So yeah, I'm fascinated by that side of writing serial killers, making the villain, for want of a phrase, three-dimensional, not just making him an unstoppable killing machine, uh, but giving that killer, be it male, female, depth. I don't want players to sympathise with what the killer is doing, but perhaps sympathise with some of the external forces that moulded him into the killer he has now become. There's a wonderful line in the film Manhunter. I've only seen Red Dragon, which was the another filming of the same book. I've only seen Red Dragon once. I can't remember whether this line is in it, but they're talking about Will Graham is talking about the duality of the Tooth Fairy, and his boss Jack Graham asks him if he sympathises with the Tooth Fairy, and Will Graham says, my heart bleeds for him as a child. He was obviously a battered infant. Someone took a baby and manufactured a monster. At the same time, as an adult, my heart bleeds for him as a child, but as an adult, he's irredeemable. He butchers whole families to pursue trivial fantasies. As an adult, someone should blow the guy away. And that is the ideology that I find fascinating. There are several episodes of the show Criminal Minds which do the same thing, showing sympathy for the monster. That the killer is, you cannot condone what they're doing, but you can sympathize that at some point in their past they were also a victim of a monster. And your heart can weep within those lines, and that I find fascinating. That sort of moral grey area, that fluidity, fascinates me. And more importantly, I find racking up the tension. So the same person commented that if you're playing a sort of FBI agent or law enforcement, which is often the case with me, um, there's no loss of control. I disagree. I think you're working on a different kind of control than, say, uh, a bunch of kids running around uh, a campsite while there's a maniac with a machete. Um, I think you can do a loss of control in the sense of feeling so helpless at being unable to stop um, this horror that's happening. I think that creates real tension. And I think a lot of people will identify with that sort of horror. I think it's a very real horror. Feeling helpless despite all your training and ability, feeling helpless to stop a killer, or when another body is found, feeling helpless, feeling that guilt, and not having been able to stop that murder. I like those things. I like those aspects of characterization. So those are my opinions. Would love to hear yours. Come on back in the comment section, and I'll be back soon with another video.